Hello, how's everyone doing today? Welcome to the channel. If you're new, if you're a returning viewer, I'm glad to have you back and welcome to another episode of Justin Talks Games. Before I get into this, there's two things I want to say. First is I do want to put a warning on this video. I am going to be talking about some pretty graphic stuff regarding, I know the title says Resident Evil Survivor, and you're like, what the hell? Survivor is a very dark Resident Evil game, and I want to talk a little bit about Survivor. So I want to give a warning if you're not into very dark stuff, if you can't handle, gruesome stuff, then, I suggest you click off this video. Excuse me. If you're okay with that kind of stuff, then, you're welcome to stay. The second thing I want to say is now that I got that warning out of the way, make sure to grab your drinks, grab your snacks. My snacks are back there, like I've always said. I don't eat my snacks on video. But yeah, grab your drinks, grab your snacks, and let's get into this. Love me some coffee. So, Resident Evil Survivor, is it canon? Yes, it is. Of course it is. There's been a lot of questions on Reddit lately, within comments, like not posts, but there's been a lot of Resident Evil 9 posts on the subreddit. And of course, it's a new game, people doing some really cool theories and thoughts and opinions. There's some really silly ones too as well, but there's some really interesting ones, and there's also some people uploading some pictures from the trailer, the quick shot ones that people could have missed. A lot of people doing really good work on there. Thumbs up to you guys for doing all the hard work and stuff. Appreciate y'all. So this video is more so, is Survivor canon? And it's because a lot of people are like, well, with the remakes, is it still canon? Resident Evil 3, I want to say, yeah, of course, Survivor is still canon. One of the biggest things that tell us that it is that Zero, in the beginning, so if you've never played Resident Evil 0 and you've watched Star Wars before, the best way to explain it is that the beginning has like a word crawl, kind of like Star Wars. But the beginning of the word crawl, it basically lists off all the events and places that has happened, after the events of Resident Evil 0. So you got like the mansion incident, you got the Raccoon City incident, you have Sheena Island, which is Survivor, and you also have, the Antarctic, and also the island that Code Veronica's on, that I honestly can't, I'm drawing a blank, which is really weird. But yeah, Sheena Island is mentioned, and that is where Survivor takes place. So that's one of the biggest indicators that, yes, it's canon. And a lot of people are asking this because of the remakes. Now, I know I said this before, but I'll say it again. The remakes do not overpower the originals. Now, I understand a lot of people have not touched Survivor because it's part of the 4 original games that were on PS1. There's a lot of new players that don't have access to the original games and haven't played them. I don't blame them. And then there's players who just think, well, the originals aren't canon anymore, so I don't need to touch them anymore, or I'll just wait for a remake to play them. And those are the guys I'm like, you don't have any reason to do that. You can just play them, especially in other means that I'm not going to say on here. There are ways to play them. But anyway, on a lot of Resident Evil 9 posts, people have been asking, hey, like I said, is Survivor canon? Mostly because Resident Evil 3, I guess Resident Evil 3, as you know, because I played that on the channel too. So instead of it being a dead factory, they added another lab, and that was so dumb. But whatever, we're not gonna start whining and complaining about Resident Evil 3 on this video. They added a lab that showed tyrants being created. Now, that's why some of the original players, once you've played as long as me, maybe a little less than me, but basically some original players, of at least from the PS1 era onwards to now, have been like, hey, is Survivor still canon? And yes, of course it's canon still. because like I said, it's in Zero. It's mentioned in Zero, and yeah, it's also one of the darkest Resident Evil games that I've ever played. Even to date, right now, it's still one of the darkest Resident Evil games that are out there. I think if they were to remake it, I think they would change a lot of stuff. They would definitely would not have the storyline of what they had in there. Yeah, it's pretty dark. I know I did the warning at the beginning of the video, but before I get into the darkness of that, excuse me, um, I will give you guys a couple of seconds to click off this video if you are not into or cannot handle, dark and graphic things. So I'll give you a couple of seconds here. Okay, and you're still here. Very good. Okay, so like I said, Survivor is a very dark game, and a lot of people don't get to experience this because people make a lot of joke videos and memes and just all these things that tear it down. Um, I will say that it does have, out of all of the four PS1 titles, it does have the worst quality in terms of writing, and it does have the worst audio quality in terms of voice recordings. I'll admit that it's very bad. It's laughably bad. Um, but in terms of quality, it's worse than Resident Evil One Originals voice work. It's very bad. But all that stuff aside, like I said, I really like Survivor, because it really gets deep into and drives home just how absolutely fucked up Umbrella is, and the terrible, terrible things that and the lengths that they are willing to go to do what they want to do. And no other Resident Evil game really does that. I mean, you have games that do, like torture and this and that, but not to the extent that Survivor does. Holy crap. Okay, so let's just rip the band aid off. So basically, they're on this island, Sheena Island. Um, there are there's like a first class citizenship and a lower class citizenship. The children that you see in the game, Lot, and I can't remember his sister's name, they would be like the higher up, and there are, like I said, lower class children. So the lower class children and teenagers, they're shipped to an umbrella prison facility, and terrible, terrible, terrible things are done to them. It's so ingrained, and so the children and the people are so brainwashed. That Lot, I think there's a note or something, I can't remember. That Lot is basically like, well, they're lower than me, so what do I care that all these bad things are happening to them? They basically deserve it, essentially. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. Kind of, I don't think he says they deserve it, but it's basically like, so what? They're like low. They're lower than me. I don't care. And that's how brainwashed they are. um, so since you're still here, what they do, you guys remember the tyrants from Resident Evil 2? Like the original, I'm talking about the original games here, of course. The tyrant that chases after Leon and Sherry and Ada and Claire and all of them, just to get Sherry's pendant that had a little vial G virus. You guys remember the corpses of the tyrants that we see in the original Resident Evil 3 within the streets and near the dead factory and all that, when the battle went down? Let's just say all those children had a hand in the process of being those tyrants being made. It's it's getting me shiver a little bit. It's messed up, man. So basically, the children and the teen, and we're talking like at least like 5, 6 years old. We're talking like young kids, and teenagers as well. 15, 16, 17, stuff like that. So like literally, I'd say from like 5 years old to like 16, 17. I'm trying to. There's the camera. So basically before an adult. What they do to these kids And again, if you're here, obviously you can handle this, but this is some, oh, it's some really, really messed up stuff. So Umbrella would strap them down, and they would basically drill or saw into their head, into their brain, while they were still awake, while under no anesthetic. They felt every single spin of that blade. They felt every cut, every little thing. And the reason why? Apparently there is a hormone that it secretes itself when in a high intense situations. And in when you are basically, I don't know what the correct term is, basically when you're being damaged in such a severe way, basically your brain secretes this stuff, and that's what Umbrella wanted to use. They, took that chemical and used that chemical from, a very distressed brain of a child, or I should say children, to help create the T-103 Tyrants. Yeah, like I said, Survivor is very, very dark. It's a very dark game. And in my opinion, no Resident Evil game has come close to how dark and really showcases how evil Umbrella is. Now, I know that Code Veronica lightly dives into the deep darkness of it, with that one scientist having his own torture dungeon and being allowed to do stuff and whatever, so it's like, okay, you're allowed to do this stuff, here you go. But like the deep details of like how their creations are made, so like the T-103 Tyrants, like I said, with the children, something with that amount of detail, you don't hear anything about that. Survivor is the only one that really goes into, the nitty gritty detail of that. Um, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of like Survivor, because it really, really drives home just how bad Umbrella is. Some people are like, "Oh, Umbrella is just like this comically evil company that makes these bad monsters," and stuff. Like, no, man, these guys are really messed up. They do some really, really bad stuff. um, so yeah, I just wanted to drive home um, the fact that how dark Umbrella or Survivor really is, and also the main topic of this video is that yes, Survivor is canon. Just because there's some tyrants being created in a lab underneath Raccoon City doesn't mean that the Tyrant Factory still doesn't exist. Of course, it still exists. Um, that's like saying, oh, well, the T virus was made in the Arkley facility, so it can't be made in the Umbrella or the Raccoon City facility. It's silly, right? But yes, Survivor is canon. It's one of the darkest games ever made, in terms of storyline and everything. If anybody has the opportunity to try it, definitely try it. I mean, yeah, get your laughs here and there because of the quality of the writing. Some of the lines are pretty silly, admittedly. Um, especially, I can't even keep a straight face. Especially when you're in the city streets and the phone's ringing and you pick up the phone and it's Vincent's mom calling. Vincent, come home. Stop doing these terrible things and come home. It's so funny. Like just the writing's so bad, but it's so funny. But when you read the documents and the notes, that's when you really start to open your eyes and you're like, wow, this is what Umbrella is really like. Um, yeah, the notes and stuff is really, really where the game shines, and the locations are pretty cool too. I like them. The only downfall to Survivor, in my opinion, is that you can't save. The only time you can save the game, if you're playing the game how it's intended on the PS1 with the PS1 disc, or on a PS2 or whatever, it doesn't matter. Basically, as long as if you're playing the original game and you're playing it as intended with the disc and stuff, the only way you can save the game is after you finish it. And like it's not very long; it's only about an hour long game. So it is very short. And when you save like the weapons you collect. There's like A B C D E A B C D E. There's at least like 5 or 6 different handguns you can get. That's not including like your Magnum, your shotgun, and stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of handguns you can get. Um, but yeah, so you can't save. You can only save them. Obviously, if you're using an emulator, you can use your save states, which is that's cool and all. So that's good. But yeah, if you have the opportunity to play Resident Evil Survivor, if you're a lore nut and you love knowing the background in the world, you want to know more about these corporations, you want to know more about what's going on, play Survivor. As much as it gets made fun of, like I said, as if you can get past the bad dialogue and the bad writing, and you play through it, and you read the notes, and you see the environmental storytelling, especially in the labs and the prison areas and all that. Oh man, oh man, it is. I really like Survivor, to be honest. So yeah, Survivor is definitely canon, especially since it says it in zero. Um, yeah, I don't know what else to say, or I'll start rambling. But yeah, I guess wanted to basically say, like I said, to answer the question, yes, Survivor is canon. This is what Survivor is about. It's a very dark game, and yeah, that's about it. So if you enjoyed this, and hopefully it answered some questions, if you were wondering if Survivor is canon or not, if you did like it, feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that fun kind of stuff, and I will see you guys in my next video. Until then, have a wonderful day.